You a property. We'll share an overview of property insurance and the financial benefits it can provide. I'll hand it over to Karen to provide further background and to introduce herself.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. As mentioned, my name is Karen Collins, and I serve as the Vice President of Property and Environmental Issues for the American Property Casualty Insurance Association, or simply APCIA for short. In my role, I provide thought leadership on property and catastrophe issues with an emphasis on risk mitigation and resilience to natural catastrophes, such as tornadoes, flooding, and other severe weather events. And I also provide policy expertise on a variety of legislative and regulatory issues at the state, federal, and international level on behalf of our association membership. I've authored numerous white papers on issues impacting property insurance markets across the US, such as inflation, natural disasters, and environmental impacts, and frequently provide presentations and interviews like this on such topics. Now, prior to joining APCA, I did acquire 20 years of insurance experience with several major insurance companies in varying roles and responsibilities spanning product management, sales, IT, and claims. And I earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, Marketing, and have previously held insurance licenses in California. So in my presentation today, I'm going to provide you with an overview of insurance and why it is important. I'll walk through what a typical homeowners insurance policy covers, with emphasis on some of the natural disaster risks for those who live in Chicago and how to prepare for those. This will include how to reduce your likelihood of experiencing a loss, as well as some recommended strategies to consider so you have adequate resources in place if you do have a loss, really to help ensure a smooth recovery. So first off, why purchase insurance? The primary function of insurance is to provide a financial safety net that helps you and your loved ones recover after something bad happens, such as a natural disaster, a fire, theft, or a car accident. There's a number of types of insurance. Now, most might be familiar with car insurance, but maybe not as many as familiar with property insurance, such as homeowners insurance, renters insurance, or landlord insurance. So homeowners insurance is designed for those who own their home and live in that home specifically. At a high level, a homeowner's policy is going to cover the structure and the stuff inside. A landlord policy is a little different in that it covers the home you own, but don't live in. So there's typically more limited coverage for the stuff that you might own that's kept in the home. A renter's insurance policy is essentially the reverse, in that it provides coverage for the stuff you do own, but doesn't cover the building that you live in, whether that's an apartment building or a single family home.
Karen,
Now yes.
We're still on slide 3 on the screen.
Yes, that's where we're supposed to be.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Yep, no problem. Because a renter's insurance policy does not cover a building, which is usually the costlier portion of a property insurance policy, renter's coverage is typically pretty affordable. And much like a homeowner's policy, a renter's policy can frequently be bundled with an auto policy to help keep costs low. So with that kind of background of the types of them, let's dig in and talk about how an insurance policy covers the building and stuff, as well as a few other coverage benefits typically included in these policies. Now, I'm going to focus on a homeowner's insurance policy, but a renter's policy is going to be very similar, just minus the coverage for the structure. So under a homeowner's policy, the first coverage is usually referred to as the dwelling coverage. Dwelling coverage covers the cost to repair or rebuild your home. Now, that's the main structure of your home, not any other structures such as fences or detached garages. And the dollar amount of coverage available under this portion of the policy is referred to as your coverage limits, basically how much the policy will pay for the home itself to repair or rebuild it. So the dwelling coverage amount is usually based on the estimated local cost needed to reconstruct your home. This includes things like the square footage, the features or materials of the home, and appliances. Now, many often confuse their homeowners coverage limits as being based on the market value or real estate value, but it's actually based on the cost to repair or rebuild, which means you want to make sure your policy reflects all of those features of your home and is periodically updated to ensure it's keeping pace with local costs. So if you've done any extensive remodeling to add maybe square footage or updated a kitchen, for example, you want to make sure those changes are reflected. Now, aside from the coverage limits, which again, that's the amount the policy will pay, it's important to know what types of losses are covered under the policy. Now, this could be an all risk or coverage may be only available for specified events. It all depends on the type of policy. Now, generally, losses due to earthquake, flood, and maintenance-related issues are excluded, as well as potentially maybe some other cause of losses that might also be specifically excluded under the policy. So again, very important to understand what type of coverage you have, in addition to the amount of coverage you have in place. So beyond the dwelling coverage, there is another coverage referred to as other structures. Now, as I mentioned, the dwelling part of the policy covers the main building, the main structure. For other structures, these will cover other structures on your policy, such as detached garage, fences, barns, gazebos, and really just any other structures that are detached. This amount of coverage is typically a percent of the coverage limits for the dwelling and is often 10% of that amount. So for example, if your dwelling coverage limits were, just for easy number, $100,000, then you might have $10,000 that is a separate pot of money that is specifically intended to help repair or rebuild those other structures. So if you live on a nice piece of land with multiple other structures, like a nice barn, tool shed, and lots of fencing, that's something you might consider adjusting your other structures coverage limits to make sure you have the right coverage that you need. But again, that amount is typically a default percentage of your dwelling coverage limits. Now, moving beyond the structure, there's also a part of your policy that specifically provides coverage for your stuff, which is referred to as personal property, or sometimes just contents coverage. This coverage and the rest that I'm going to cover exists under a homeowner's policy as well as a renter's policy. So personal property, this covers the personal property belonging to the insured for specified risks of loss. Under a homeowner's policy, the amount of this coverage is generally 50 to 70% of the insurance on the dwelling. And there may be limits on some coverage for property that is not maybe stored at the insured premises. If you've got like a storage unit, there might be limited amounts while it's there off premises. For a renter's policy, since there's not a structure, you just need to identify the amount of coverage that you desire based on roughly the estimated cost you might need to replace your belongings if something were to occur where you lost all of those. Now, one of the common mistakes made by renters is to think that a landlord's insurance policy will pay for the cost to replace your personal possessions if, for example, the building caught on fire or flooded, damaging or destroying your stuff. However, a landlord's policy will only cover structural damage to the building or limited coverage for the property, again, that they own that might be in that building, like maybe a refrigerator or washer dryer set. So the personal belongings of the tenant are not covered under a landlord's policy. And that's why it's really important for renters to also consider purchasing insurance to protect their belongings. So these three coverages, dwelling, other structures, and personal property, are the key coverages that will help cover the cost to repair, rebuild, or replace the physical property. But there are several other coverages also available under a homeowner's and a renter's policy that are also very beneficial. First off, loss of use, also commonly referred to as additional living expenses. This covers the expenses that you may incur in addition to your normal living expenses if you can't live in your home due to an insured loss. If you need to move out of the home, whether for a few days, weeks, months, or even years, while the home is being repaired or rebuilt, these costs can quickly add up. So for homeowners, this is particularly true if you're still making mortgage payments for the home, but might also need to pay for a hotel or longer-term rental. Also consider eating out if you don't have a kitchen while in a temporary living situation like a hotel. For renters, again, a landlord policy doesn't cover your expenses when you need to temporarily relocate. So this is a very beneficial coverage to have. The amount of this coverage, again, meaning the coverage limits, can vary widely. So it's a good idea to ask about this coverage when you are shopping for insurance. Then there's personal liability coverage. This covers injuries or property damage to others for which you might be found legally responsible for. Some common examples of personal liability claims include medical bills when a visitor that is injured at your home, legal expenses from a lawsuit that seeks to recover damages that are covered by your policy. It could be bodily injury or property damage due to your negligent acts or failure to address, or bodily injury or property damage caused maybe by your pets or your children if you have children. Medical payments to others is a slightly different benefit. This covers medical payments to others if they're injured on your property. Now, it's slightly different than the personal liability, as it doesn't matter if you're at fault for an injury. That coverage is simply available to pay for basic medical costs if somebody is injured. So the limits are typically much less. So for medical payments, these might be as low as $1,000 to maybe up to $5,000 or so, whereas personal liability limits may often start as low as $100,000 and can go as high as $500,000 or even $1 million. So these are the common coverages that together make up the typical homeowners or renters insurance policy. So let's shift gears a little and talk about common natural disaster risks. Flooding, tornadoes, windstorms, and hail are frequent events in Chicago during the spring. While there wasn't much snow accumulation so far in 2023, it has been offset by more winter rainstorms than normal. The winter was the 15th wettest in recorded history, going all the way back 150 years. So this means there is a risk of springtime flooding. Additionally, flooding in Chicago is often the result of too much rainwater for the drainage systems to handle, and the result is flooded streets and basements. These events can be costly. However, the typical homeowner's policy does not cover flood damage. Property owners can evaluate their flood risk through the Federal Emergency Management Agency's Flood Map Service Center, or by calling their insurance company or agent, or by contacting their local city or county government. Now, the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP for short, does cover river flooding, which is the most frequent and costly natural disaster. It is important for all homeowners to understand their flood risk so that they ensure there are no gaps in their insurance coverage. A homeowner is not required to buy a flood insurance policy, but it can be very valuable and can be secured through the NFIP program or through an agent or broker that is authorized to write flood insurance. So again, evaluating your flood risk is very important and is a great way to help ensure you're better prepared for the spring flood season. Now, if a tornado or hailstorm occurs and causes property damage, those with homeowners, renters, and business insurance are typically covered. Again, your policy will outline the events that are covered in the policy, such as fire, lightning, windstorm, hail, theft, vandalism, explosion, and a variety of other disasters. Now, tornado and hail damage to an automobile is also covered under an auto insurance policy if you have purchased comprehensive insurance. Now, this is an optional coverage unless you have a loan or lease on the car, in which case your loan or lease company may require you to carry it. But comprehensive coverage helps to pay or replace or repair your vehicle if it's stolen or damaged in an incident that's not a collision. Typically, if you have what's referred to as full coverage, that typically means your auto policy includes comprehensive and collision coverage. Though there might still be some other optional coverage you should consider, such as, for example, towing or roadside coverage, or maybe coverage for a rental car while your vehicle is being repaired. Deductibles. Now, this is an important insurance concept for policyholders to understand. Your deductible is the amount that you pay for when a covered loss occurs. The amount of the deductible may vary based on the details of your policy. The amount of the deductible may be based on the, for instance, you might have a $250 or $500 deductible on your car, but your homeowner's deductible may be a flat dollar amount, or it could be a percentage of the total amount that you have your insured home for. So for example, using again a simple number, $100,000 policy for a home with maybe a 2% deductible would mean that you would pay $2,000 if you have a loss. Think of a deductible as one way that you and your insurer share in paying for an insured loss. Generally, the higher the deductible or the amount of the loss that you are willing to pay, the lower your insurance premium is going to be. So as you're deciding on the deductible amount, it's really important to determine how much you can afford to pay out of pocket to get the repair started, which can then help influence what your insurance premiums are going to be. Now, there's a number of steps you can take to help prepare for a natural disaster. First, talk with your agent or broker yearly about your insurance needs and make sure you have both the right type and amount of insurance. Too often, people overestimate their preparedness for natural disasters or other emergencies and this can lead to gaps in preparedness and coverage. So the first two steps are the best way to keep from being surprised in the recovery process following a disaster. Now, we recommend you review the declarations page, which provides a summary of your coverage limits for each of the coverages I mentioned, and check whether your policy pays for replacement costs or actual cash value for a covered loss. Also check if your policy includes optional features. I'll cover a few of those in more detail in just a moment. But make a home inventory also of all your possessions. You can use your phone and your camera to record everything you have in your house. This is helpful when you do need to submit a claim to identify all of the items that were damaged or destroyed. You should develop an emergency plan and an emergency communications plan also. Decide how do you want to get in contact with other family members and where would you want to meet in case of an emergency. So the recommended elements of an emergency plan include determine the natural disasters in your community, consider how you want to respond to those emergencies, think about the emergency that may require a family to shelter in place, such as a winter storm. The recommended elements of an emergency communications plan, on the other hand, so the communications part, you should consider making a list of emergency contact phone numbers, emails, etc., including maybe also your doctor, insurance agent, school, or office. Determine in advance how your family will reach each other and where to meet up. And also, it's important to practice that plan, maybe at least once or twice a year, and especially if you have kids, pets, or any other special needs. Now, should that loss unfortunately occur, you'll want to have an emergency supply kit on hand. This should ideally include a battery-powered radio, flashlight, batteries and first aid items. A few snacks and water probably wouldn't be a bad idea either. For those who live in Illinois, the NOAA weather radios are also helpful to ensure you can receive severe weather warnings while sleeping, though many are also now signing up for alerts via phone. You'll want to ensure you have your insurance policy also in a safe place and readily available with your company or agent's information and any other important documents. Now, this you might keep in a safe, but many now store those types of documents electronically in the cloud. And if you need to report a loss, most companies now also have multiple ways to report the claim, whether that's by phone or the internet. And finally, last but not least, the best way to prepare is taking steps to avoid the loss altogether. There are a number of things you can do to mitigate your risk. This includes examining your home for potential threats like overhanging tree limbs, furniture, or other items that could become hazardous and cause damage to your home during a storm. There might be other adjustments you can make to your home, such as modifying certain building materials or other upgrades that can help make the home become more disaster resilient. So as mentioned earlier, you don't want to be caught surprised after the loss occurred. In polling that we did last year, our results showed that most Americans say they are prepared for natural disasters or severe weather. However, very few had conducted an annual insurance checkup to make sure they are, in fact, adequately covered. Now, this was particularly concerning in light of recent severe inflation that has significantly increased the costs and timeframes needed to rebuild. So to keep from being surprised in the recovery process following disaster, we strongly recommend homeowners talk with their agent or company about their policy and consider adding the following key coverage features if needed. Replacement cost coverage. This will pay an amount necessary to rebuild the home with construction materials of like kind and quality and replace your personal belongings without any deduction for depreciation. There's an automatic inflation guard option, which often will automatically adjust your coverage amount with each policy renewal to help keep up with rising costs. Now, again, we've experienced a severe period of inflation, so it's still important to review those coverage limits. Don't set it and forget it. There's building code and ordinance coverage. This specifically helps comply with new building code or green energy ordinances by increasing the coverage limits you have available for your dwelling. Now, for those that might live in older buildings that might require more updates to comply with newer building codes, this is actually a very important coverage to have or even to increase slightly if needed. There is an extended replacement cost coverage that would be available to help rebuild your home when labor and material costs skyrocket after a natural disaster. So it gives you an extra boost in your coverage limits to be able to absorb some of those spikes in those labor material costs. And then finally, additional living expense coverage, that loss of use I mentioned earlier. You can optionally increase those limits to help better cover the hotel and food costs if you find that a longer time frame is likely going to be needed to rebuild your home. And with a lot of the supply chain issues coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are seeing those longer timeframes. So this is a good one to think about right now. So again, the yearly insurance review with your agent can enable you to have a better understanding of what is and is not covered. And if needed, you can update that insurance policy. We're seeing natural disasters occurring in places that are not typically accustomed to these events. So even if you don't live in a high-risk area, you still need to be prepared for the unexpected. Now, closing insurance gaps simply means examining your own individual risk and making adjustments to purchase enough and the right type of insurance so that you can fully recover. So as we're still in the peak of tornado season, for those impacted by a tornado, it's important to know that insurance will play a key role in helping those who've been impacted recover. Specifically, it'll help by paying claims to help you rebuild if a tornado damages or destroys your home. It can get you onto the road to recovery by helping with expenses such as the cost of hotels, clothing, and food if your home is uninhabitable to the storm. Your insurer can help you find a reputable contractor to repair damage to your home. And your policy often will pay to cover damage caused by a tree falling on your home, whether that tree is on your property or from another property. Though if you do own the tree and it's rotted, it's important to know that that might be considered a maintenance-related issue and your policy might not pay for such maintenance-related repairs. So again, pay close attention to the conditions on your property. So finally, since your home is often your biggest asset, you want to make sure it's protected by having both the right amount and the right type of coverage. However, to help keep those insurance rates more affordable, there's a few steps you can take. Earlier, I mentioned you can increase your deductible or you can take steps to reduce your risk, which might help you actually qualify for a discount, such as building upgrades to be more disaster resilient or installing even safety devices such as water leak detection sensors or security systems and cameras. These can help either prevent a loss or might reduce the severity of a loss that does occur. You should also consider bundling your home and auto to potentially further save money. Be sure to shop around for the best insurance coverage for your needs at the best price. Check the deductible. Some companies have a standard $500 deductible, while others might have that default standard be $1,000. So it can also be a percentage of your property's insured value for those homes. Check for discounts. There may be discounts if you install smoke alarms or, as I mentioned, have a security system or do take steps to mitigate against potential damage. And finally, pay attention to your deductible, take steps to reduce your risk, and find whatever might be available to you by talking to your insurance company to help further save money. So in closing, as consumers, we all have a role in making informed decisions on how to best protect our property and assets. Insurance is a very important tool that can help with physical and financial preparedness, meaning ways to reduce our risk and help financially recover from the losses that do occur. I hope you found this information to be informative and certainly will welcome any questions that you do have. Thank you.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions yet, but I know I have some questions. Because Karen, you did, I love your presentation, and I know as a HUD housing counselor, we have some responsibility as counselors to assist a lot of our clients in the whole, I guess, process if we have a natural disaster in this area. And part of that is helping clients with their disaster plan. So you mentioned a couple of things and you kind of like really went over it really quickly, but you said some very important things. And one is to make a plan. and just to gather all that information together. So how important is that? I mean, that sounds so tedious because you said it, get a plan and then you have to do this, and you said it so quickly, but how important is that?
You don't want to be thinking about these for the first time when you're stressed and overwhelmed from a natural disaster. So when we say having a plan, it's taking a moment to think about, how would I approach this challenge? What are the things that I need to be thinking about? Who's in my household? Do I have young kids? Do I have pets? Do I have an elderly parent living with me? Do I have family that live across town? Would I want to go and stay with them? What if they are impacted by the same event? Where would we all want to meet up and let each other know that we are safe and what our next steps are going to be? So talking through that is the first step. If you can put that plan in writing or have just a way to remind yourself periodically of what that plan is, or, when you have small children, they may not understand that. And so practicing it is actually helpful in the same way that schools do emergency drills, so that kids, it kind of becomes routine and they know what to do when that happens. If they are not with you when that disaster happens, how do they know how to get in contact with you? So as a family unit, you should talk about this, and depending on who's involved, you may need to actually practice that, so that when the disaster does occur, it's almost more of a reflex of, this is what we're going to do.
So I
I would
know
like to
we,
add, I can just
okay,
add a couple of things to what Karen was saying, is that one example is that, you never know when that tornado is going to come or some other event may occur. And, part of the family may be at work or at school, and so that's where that communication plan comes into play, because, or even have a place to meet up, where you're not meeting up at the house, because if the house is damaged, you can't go back to the house, so having those places predetermined makes a lot of sense. And as Karen was saying, is that you don't want to be thinking about this and trying to wing it. You want to have it already kind of thought through. The other thing I was going to say was that with home fire is another example of where having practice makes, it makes it a lot more efficient in terms of being able to get out of the house and where do you go and make sure everybody is safe and that sort of stuff. And having thought through it and talked through it, and having the kids have a place to go, that's away from the house, that where they're going to be, so you're not wondering if was anybody left behind. And so it can be really crucial to have thought through and talk through these kinds of things. And the last thing I was going to say, it's Karen mentioned this before, was, in terms of your house, when you have a event that occurs, let's say a tornado or whatever, and you're not going to remember all the things that you had in your house. And so having gone through the house with everyone has a cell phone and a camera. And so just go through the house, take photographs or take a video of all your possessions, check in the closets, go into the garage, all those places that you might not think about, but have things stored away in. And that way you have it recorded, save it to a cloud, so that if something does happen, you can access it and share it with your agent. And in that way, you're sure to be able to account for all the property that you had.
And I think one of the things with natural disasters in particular, when you have these large, widespread events, things aren't going to be the same. You may not have phone service. The cell phone towers may be gone. And so when you think about that emergency communication, the things that we're so used to may not be available to us, at least not for a little while. And that's why for natural disasters, even more so than just a house fire, something that's unique to your home only, those sorts of plans are that much more important, because you're kind of feeling your way through what is a very uncertain period where things may not be familiar or the same tools may not be available to you.
so having those two-way radios may come into play, you know.
Some might, when we see FEMA and others come into these larger disaster areas, there may be temporary tools that they need for communication. We have satellite phones that are newer technology, which is great, but old school walkie-talkies, for those of us
I
that do not
know,
have that,
I know. My brother-in-law still use those, and I laugh, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Right.
he may be on to something.
We are so blessed with the technology and the things that are available to us today, but that is the thing with Mother Nature, is that can reset what we are accustomed to. And that's where that plan and those alternative strategies to reconnect with our loved ones and friends is really important.
That's true. So I'm overwhelmed by all of this information, and I know anybody who's listening is, because it's a lot to take in. So where do I begin? Because Jeffrey, you said something. Okay, I'm gonna start recording, because when I got insurance, that's what they told me to take inventory. So I'm taking inventory anyway because I have to do it for insurance purposes. And every time when I do my yearly, check-in, I take inventory because I may get something new, or I may upgrade the house or something. So I have to do that anyway. So I'm okay on that. But then, like you said, take that inventory, put it in a cloud. So I'm okay on that. But then I have to also plan, because there's different kind of catastrophes or disasters, and then I have to plan accordingly. So because we're in Northwest, and because we're in the Northwest area, what are the typical ones that I should prepare for? Because most likely I won't experience a hurricane, right? So, and I won't typically do a wildfire. So what are the ones we mostly should prepare for? Because is it floods, and is it windstorms, tornadoes, and what else is it that we should probably prepare for?
I think hail is another one. We get a lot of hail here as well. And
Okay.
that can damage your roof. And then all of a sudden you got leak, and then you got water damage in the house. And, so there can be a lot of, it can quickly add up in terms of the damage and the cost. And
Okay.
taking that into account, hail. And right now we are in the end of May, but the peak of tornado season, it really doesn't end here in the Midwest until, June. And so we're still susceptible to having, that changeable weather. So even though we've gotten kind of past that, we had a really tough April in terms of, tornadoes and that sort of stuff, and it's kind of calmed down a bit, but we're not out of the woods yet.
Right. And then when does it pick up again? And then we go right into winter, right? And then we have the winter storm, right?
Yes, you can get winter storms, and that can be particularly hard, because it's so cold out. Where with the summertime stuff, it's a little bit easier, but it's still with winter, you can have trees falling. You can have with too much snow, you can get the ice dams. So there can a lot of possibilities there as well.
Right. And then if you have pets, that's a whole different arena, because then it's a different way, that where if it's a disaster, you can't take your pets into different shelters if you have to go into a shelter, right? Because I don't have a pet, so how does that work out?
Yeah, with disasters, there's often different shelters that might be designated by FEMA. I live out in the West. I'm in California, which goes through a lot of the wildfires, and often you'll see that they'll work with the Red Cross to establish shelters. There might be multiple shelters for those that have large lots with farm animals, cattle, whatever, the horses. There may be sometimes fairgrounds that get established for those with, larger animals. And so there may be different options, but that's again part of where you want to have an idea of where would I go if I do have these unique considerations that might need special attention in the moment, which if you have that plan beforehand, it makes it just that much easier, because the shock of the event alone can be overwhelming, but now trying to navigate what do I do next? So that is definitely an important consideration.
And the Red Cross often knows where the shelters would be and if they're pet friendly. And the city will also know, that Chicago, I think it's the 311 number that you can dial, and they can, share with you, shelters that, would be able to take your pet and that sort of thing. Because they know just from experience of having lots of storms over the years, that people have pets and they don't want to leave them just chained up outside, or, in a house that's not, fit for habitation. And so you've got to take your pet and, and I think in terms of the management of these kinds of disasters, there's much more availability for those kinds of considerations.
Okay, well, I'm going to start sharing some resources that I have now. You did email some resources that I'm going to send out to everybody who's on the webinar. So I'm going to start sharing my screen to kind of go through some of the resources that you guys sent, and then I'm going to start sharing mine while in the event someone has some questions, please, you can either raise your hand, I'll call on you so you can ask questions, or if you just want to type in the Q&A, you can ask some questions as well. So I'm going to go and let's see, I'm going to start sharing, let's see, my screen and see what I can come up with as soon as I can get to it. So let's see, where do I go to? Have you stopped sharing? Yeah, yes, you have stopped sharing.
I can see all of your lovely faces.
Okay, so let's see. So, oh, here we go. So I'm going to go to, here we go. So this was one of yours. This was, this was one of, how to, let's see, how to save. It's how to save money on home insurance. This was one. Let's see. It did, I'm not sharing it. I don't think so. Oh, here it is. Am I sharing it now? Did it come up? Okay.
Yeah, we can
how to save money on homeowners insurance. So this is some information, and I think you kind of went over it, and it kind of just talks about the different ways. So this is some ways that Karen, you kind of shared with us, and then this just talks about tornado preparedness. This is, you kind of gave us a guide, severe weather. These are some tips that you gave us, as well as some information about some recovery tips. And I know this is kind of small, but let's see if I can, I don't think I can enlarge this right now, but
Want us to walk through it a little bit? You want us to walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, if you can, let's see
Okay.
if I can enlarge, because I'm sharing that now. I'm just trying to see what I can, oh, here you go. Okay, if you want to go through this a little bit, recovery tips on how to avoid. Yeah, I do need you to go through this for a little bit, and I'll kind of go through my stuff. But if you want to go through this recovery tips, because this is a big thing too, when people kind of come through afterwards, this is the aftermath. Okay.
Yes, we unfortunately, with the large number of natural disasters that we've been seeing, in fact, we've had the costliest 3-year period just since 2020 through 2022 for insured losses for disasters. It's been very active. And with that surge, there are unfortunately some that view that as an opportunity, and they want to try to come into the insurance claims process and try to abuse that for their own gain. And so while there's many reputable contractors and we appreciate and work with them, you want to be on the alert for those that are maybe looking to take advantage. So these are some of the tips that you have. Look for some of the red flags. You don't want to really, be mindful of those that are going door to door. If they're giving you some sort of high pressure sales strategy to rush you into a contract, red flag. You want to make sure that you are working with your insurance company to make sure that what they're telling you to do is in fact needed. Work with them, make sure it's covered. Make sure that they're licensed. Also, you want to make sure that they have the proper liability insurance and workers' compensation insurance coverage in place, so that if something happens, that doesn't end up becoming your responsibility for something that is their mistake. You can easily check for a license by contacting your state's licensing board, and that will also help you with identifying if they're licensed and bonded specifically. Local address, that can be a red flag. If they're coming in from out of state, that's sometimes one of those red flags to look for. Are they truly a local business that has been here and is willing to assist? A good business practice or just general practice that we recommend is shop around, get bids, check their references. This is true for when you're repairing your home, as with many other kind of large, projects you might do. So get those competitive bids and make sure that they're giving you reasonable rates and not taking advantage. You want to make sure that what they're doing also is timely and is up to code, that they're not taking shortcuts. With the payment of claims, often these will be done as installments. Often you'll have an initial upfront payment to kind of help with some of the material costs. There might be a midpoint check-in and then a final payment. So often when you're doing these repairs, it's an installment. If they're asking you for everything all up front, that should be another red flag. And you want to make sure that you are verifying that all of the work is actually getting completed and against the invoices that they're charging, so that there's nothing going to be an issue once you have to turn that over to the insurance company. And as with most anything, get it in writing. You want them to put that into a written contract that is very clear for you on what they're expecting to do for you with the prices of labor, materials, everything else. So these are, again, just some of those best practices to be aware of, things to be mindful of while you're getting everything lined up for the recovery process.
Great. So I'm going to email this to everybody who's on the webinar, so you don't have to worry about, not getting this, but you're definitely going to get this. So great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And then let's see, I'm going to go to, let's see, I think there was something else. I did want to share a video. I'm going to check and see if I can get to, at least I thought I had it. Let's see if I can get to it. It was another website, but it was on ready.gov, where you can contact them, and it was a video just to kind of talk about well, they were just talking about the different disasters that you may come across, and that you would be able to, let's see, you would be able to perhaps get over. So let me see if I can bring that up real quickly. I thought I had it, and maybe I got out of it, but let me check and see if I have it ready to go. Because if not, then I'm going to go right into just sharing what I have, because I do have a couple of documents that I am ready to share before we go right into that, because there is a couple of kits. There's a toolkit that HUD wants us to give everybody. And let's see, disaster preparedness. Let me see if this is it. Yeah, I think this is it. Okay. Let me make sure I'm able to. Yeah. This is from the CFPB, but it wasn't. It was disaster preparedness. This is one. Not COVID-19, so wrong one. Make a plan. Financial preparedness. This is the one. Okay, here we go. Definitely have to brush up on my sharing techniques. Are we sharing? It's not sharing because I'm sharing. I'm saying it's a new share. You are sharing your screen. That's what it says. Okay.
And we got a bit of a gray box.
Okay.
Natural disasters can happen.
Did it? Are we sharing that? Am I sharing?
It just
Yes.
went. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Oh, now we're back to, here we go.
Anywhere. You can protect yourself by planning ahead. Consumerfinance.gov has the information you need to make a plan and help safeguard your financial future in the event of a disaster. Whether you're at risk of hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, wildfires, or earthquakes, here are 3 steps you can take right now to protect yourself financially and weather any storm. Step 1. Download FEMA's Emergency Financial First Aid Kit and fill it out. Gathering all of the paperwork and filling out the forms may take some time, but it'll be worth it if disaster strikes. Once you complete the kit, you'll have everything you need in one place. You'll have gathered important documents like your ID and your Social Security card. You'll have written down the phone numbers and account numbers to your credit card companies, utility companies, insurance companies, and more. If you need to apply for disaster aid or contact your insurance company, you'll want this info on hand. Step 2. Find a safe space to store the kit and the documents you've gathered. Consumerfinance.gov recommends that you make a copy and store the original and the copy in separate places. If it's digital, password protect it, and if it's printed or on a thumb drive, make sure to store it in a waterproof and fireproof container. Step 3. Make sure you understand your insurance options and the extent of your coverage in case of a disaster. Renters, homeowners, and auto insurance policies generally don't cover all aspects of a disaster. You may need to look into specialized coverage, like earthquake insurance and flood insurance. A weekend of prep now can save you months of frustration and lots of money if your property is damaged in a disaster. For more information on how you can protect your property and finances, and to download an emergency financial first aid kit before disaster strikes, visit consumerfinance.gov/prepare.
Okay. Now that was the one video I definitely wanted to share. And then let's see if there's that other one, which I'm not gonna worry about. But that is what I really want everybody to see, because that's the one document that will at least help guide you, because Karen, you mentioned it. So remember how you said you got to gather all that information? That's the one document that's gonna help you and guide you and say, hey, if there's the wills, there's the credit card information, where's the insurance policy. So that one document that they mentioned that FEMA suggested is going to help you guide. Because remember, I said, I'm so overwhelmed. Like, where do I start? What documents do I need? That one document is going to help you. And as a housing counselor, that's what I'm to do, because you're going to be like, you know, all of the agency, because even when I look through that document, and I'll get a sneak peek for everybody since we got like 7 minutes. So I'm gonna look and see if I have that document up. Let's see. I don't have it up right now, but let's see if I can get to it. Let's see. Okay, here it is. Yeah, see my sharing techniques. Here we go again. Okay, so this is the document. It's 41 pages, you guys, but it is going to help you gather all your information. So this is a big document, but it is going to help you. And then you can also, the good thing about it is it's going to help you, and you can type everything in. So your driver's license number, you can put your photos in here, and you can upload it into a cloud, all your credit card information. So you can, this is user friendly. You can put it in a PDF form. And then these are some other documents I'm going to send you.
So let me give you maybe just a couple quick tips on this. This is a great document to store all of that information together. Just as much as we prepare for natural disasters, we also encourage good cyber health and protection. And so, as was mentioned on that video, with the level of detail that you might keep in a file like this, which is very important to have all of those names and numbers and background, make sure you have a security system plan for storing that electronically. Password protect that, put it in a safe file that you can password protect so that you don't run the risk of another disaster by accident, the unintended disasters. With a document like this, it's also really, really helpful to have a one-stop shop where you can turn to with all of that. For some folks, if that's not a possibility, just have maybe a designated folder where you can drop maybe some of the copies of your policies into that. You know, maybe if you have an email account that has a designated folder that you're keeping kind of some of those important, emails with information. And so there can be a couple different approaches, but a one-stop shop is always the easiest. Just make sure you have a plan on how to keep that protected as well.
Right. And then let's see, it's another document. It's called the, it's called the household, let's see, it's called the fact sheet, home and family preparedness. And it gives you different terminology, like tells you the difference from an advisory, a watch, and a warning. And I didn't know all the different facts either. But one is considered, the watch is like a risk, but a warning is imminent. It is likely to happen. You need to take, cover. It goes all the way into creating that emergency plan, preparing. It gives you information, what to stock in your emergency plan, kit, miscellaneous items, what to gather. And it tells you for which disaster. This is all good information, everyone. So I'm going to send this to you. And for the last thing, I'm looking at my time now, and I'm going to do a new share. And this is the very last thing. And it's going to be the last fact sheet. It's going to be basic home maintenance. So this is the after effect. This is the home damage prevention. This is the overall, like if there's a hurricane, what do you do? If it's the earthquake, what do you do after? A tornado, what do you do after? Wildfires, what do you do afterwards? Before, doing, disaster, afterwards. So this is all good information. So hopefully tonight you've gotten some information from us. This topic is so new, and I appreciate you, Karen and Jeffrey, for spending this evening with us. Again, I hope we do this again and again and again, kind of break this down. And this is such a new topic that I just appreciate you spending this time with us to kind of break down the information. And hopefully people will kind of jump on board and say, you know what, that is good information, and I really do need it. So hopefully they're going to reach out to you and ask for more information. So until next time we meet again, which will be soon in the future, and then give us some information when it becomes that blizzard time, because you kind of gave us some information regarding the tornadoes, but we're going to need some more information regarding those blizzards and what can we do when it becomes blizzard time. What do we do? All right.
All right, sounds good. Thanks so much, Pam.
Thank you. All right. You have a great evening. Again, my name is Pamela Stalling, and I am the Vice President of Housing and Financial Empowerment Center with Chicago Urban League. And I am glad to give you this information regarding disaster preparedness. And we will be glad to work with you. We have a staff, Cynthia Jordan Hubbard, she is our director. Then we have Deirdre Beaver, she is our rental counselor. And then we have Cashay Collins, she is our intake specialist. So please give us a call. And if you need any more information, call the Urban League. Thank you and have a great evening. It is 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you.